I was a freshman or a first year or freshers, depending on which country you're from, in college in the middle of rural Ohio, I had just made my first friends, and one of them asked me if I was a fan of Community, 30 Rock, Derek Comedy, and Childish Gambino. It is safe to say that I did not know what any of those things really were, but they did all have one thing in common, and that is Donald Glover. So, I remember listening to EPs and mixtapes by Childish Gambino, watching comedy clips of Glover performing until he finally released Camp in 2011. Camp was sort of a game changer for my friend group. We might have thrown an annual party based around the themes of Camp because of our obsession with it. Bonfire became a staple track that was played at every single pregame, and my white, black, mixed race friends of all nations could rap every single part, the fast and the slow ones, to Camp. So because of our obsession, I ended up seeing him on the I Am Donald tour the following summer. So Donald Glover and Childish Gambino is an artist whose semi-meteoric rise I have followed, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about Awaken, My Love, which was his latest release, and it was an extreme departure, I think, from what was expected of him, or at least what I expected of him. And maybe it's because I heard the album before reading up a lot about it, but I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for him to rap. So, I think I had a little bit of a genre dissonance while listening to it, because I think even when I re-listened to it, I was still really waiting for him to rap, and slightly disappointed that he didn't. But that being said, I thought it was a magnificent retro-futurist throwback album, which at times felt a bit miasmatic, like very heavy, like I was stuck in something and couldn't hoist myself physically from it.
That's interesting. I could see how someone who would listen to this as a rap album could get colossal blue balls from the experience.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah. And that must be uncomfortable. I didn't go into this album expecting it... No, that's not true. I definitely went into this album expecting it to be a rap album. And then I was so blown away by what he was doing musically here. And just the way he was stitching together all these different past influences of soul and funk, and just turning it into something that was greater than the sum of its own parts. You know, it was, just a really dynamic album to listen to. It covered a huge variety of different kinds of sound and approaches to thinking about music. And even vocally, some of the stuff that Donald Glover's doing in this is just outstanding, and just such a variety of approaches to what role the male rapper vocalist has inside of an album. It just all kind of blends into the same texture and just becomes about the songs than it does about the individual.
If nothing else, it further complicated his identity, in my opinion. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there was quite a bit of lead up to this album where, he created an app and he performed at Joshua Tree, and he really brought in this festival soul vibe, which I think is a definite shift in his previous aesthetic as this sort of in-your-face artist who does these I know it's noted that at a Coachella or some big, desert concert, wherever it is, he did this thing where he, on one day, did a set as Gambino, rapping and performing music, and the next day did a set as Glover, doing comedy. So I think that this is one of the first times where he has blended his personas as a musician and as an actor. Now, I have not yet watched Atlanta, but and I will as soon as it gets on Netflix, I promise. But from what I understand, it's a very immersive series that focuses on issues that he's always mentioned in his rap music: racial identity, class identity, what it means to be from the South, what it means to be a black man. And I think he brought that to a new level by reaching back to all of this 70s music, Sly and the Family Stone. I know he was definitely compared to Prince, which is, I think, a bit of a dangerous comparison and a shame to always have to draw these comparisons between artists, because I do think it encumbers us from looking at them as standalone pieces. As you were saying with his vocals, I don't always think that he had the vocal range to support what he wanted to do, but, that's part of the charm, I think. It's one of the reasons why we like to listen to musicians live, because we like to hear the crunch of their vocals, and I think that the production quality on this album was high enough to show that he had a holistic vision for what he wanted to achieve, but also not too glossy so that it kept the music personal and relatable. So yeah, I think if I had to choose one word to describe this, it would be immersive.
Yeah, the vocal quality, there was nothing that really stood out for me, but then I guess there were parts of it, especially the opener, that really took me back to people like Screaming Jay Hawkins, who, phenomenal artists, but technical ability, not really something that's ever really been analyzed, because it's just indicative of the entire aesthetic experience of listening to that music, is it sounds like that. And that's what I really liked about this album, was every single part, every single song that was presented, it had the feeling that it was supposed to sound like that.
Yeah.
When his vocals were strained, or when something didn't quite land, it still felt natural. It didn't feel like a bad production choice.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's an incredibly polished album, and I think it's one of the most dynamic and interesting listens I've had in the year 2016.
I think my favorite track was probably Boogeyman, which was one of the strongest throwbacks to the funk era, with those funk harmonies and the instrumental breaks. But the track that really threw me for a loop was, I think it was actually called California. I think that's the one with the bottles playing on it.
Yeah.
And that served as which I really loved the instrumentals for it, and I liked his vocal affectation. However, the song felt odd in the scope of the full album, and I felt that the lyrics were a bit forced. It had this very patois feeling to it, which was interesting, and also, a grand departure from what he had established. And I don't know, I guess it's not a bad song standalone, but it was strange that he would go to such lengths to create this audible landscape, which I thought he was extremely effective in doing, and then to interrupt it with California felt strange to me.
Yeah, it's something of a jarring point on the album. The album never really settles into a groove, it just kind of it kind of jumps from point to point, and the references are so kaleidoscopic that I think that's what generates a lot of the interest for me, is sort of seeing what he's going to draw on next. And by mixing it up so frequently, I think it gives it this really cohesive sound of just complete exploration of all these different influences. Yeah, I take what you mean by California being somewhat jarring, but I think it also points to sort of a more comical side of the artist.
Yeah.
I think that this is definitely an album that takes pains to cast him as an artist and not as a comedian.
Yeah, and once again, a socially conscious artist, because to me, the nature of discussion on the track Boogeyman is very much about the perception of black male Americans in 2016, which is a topic that we will expand on at a later date. But, Glover is still politically engaged. He's obviously extremely intelligent, even without the clever turns of phrase that he has often relied on in his rap music, such as the extremely important question, why does every black actor gotta rap some, from the song Bonfire on 2011's Camp. I think that his intelligence and his social awareness shines through on this album, as it always does in his comedy, and for that, I think he remains an incredibly important voice in modern music. In summation, I hope that he tours this album, because I would definitely be interested in seeing how he translates his growing visual aesthetic onto a live performance. As you know, Sam, I am a theater maker, so the spectacle of a performance is extremely important to me, and this is definitely one that I would love to witness, because if it is as immersive as his album is, I'm sure it would be something to be a part of. So I'm excited to see his next steps in music and what new identity he takes on.